it's done. She should be released. Is that what I'm getting?
The minute they pulled out the leaf blower, I think the state should have reconsidered bringing this case in the first place.
One of my
and that's
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. And everybody in chat who's saying, "Oh, Dani, you're getting one fact wrong or two facts wrong here," dude. That doesn't negate the other facts that are correct, that you have no explanation for, that the state has no explanation for, that it doesn't negate the fact that the state effed up their investigation, period. And that they are now effing up their prosecution. It doesn't negate the fact that they failed to disclose documents, that they failed to disclose video. And 2 weeks ago, during these pretrial hearings on the second trial, the last trial ended in a mistrial, which it really shouldn't have. If the judge would have just given the defense a gosh dang second to respond, it probably wouldn't have. We probably would have had a conviction on at least, or a decision on at least 2 of the charges. And then we would be back here on a retrial on 1 charge. But now we have this whole double jeopardy thing going on. So they're appealing that.
Aren't you glad I asked, folks? Aren't you glad I asked for the summary?
So yesterday, speed forward to yesterday, there's this, and then there's this other case going on at the same time that involves this investigative journalist. His name's Turtle Boy. Or he calls himself Turtle Boy.
Well, let's finish this with Karen Reed, because we have a limited amount of time and I want to kind of wrap it. But Turtle Boy is related to Karen Reed?
It's related to Karen Reed because they're trying to get in evidence through that case by getting access to her cell phone and trying to say, well, here's all this stuff that otherwise wouldn't be admissible, totally irrelevant, but we're going to try and search for it through Turtle Boy's case. So defense shows up yesterday and starts arguing. And for the first time ever, we see a judge who is unbiased, who follows the rules, and asks questions of the defense or of the prosecution for the first time in this entire saga. And it was so night and day. It was like a huge breath of fresh air. And then we go to the next hearing and it's just right back down. Nate, there was a point in time where the prosecution was saying he's not allowed to bring in that expert because he just wants that expert to come in and testify to his case that's going to support that Karen Reed didn't hit her with the car. And the defense stands up and says, yeah, that's called putting on a defense. And
wow.
Furthermore, and then
that was that great video that went viral yesterday. Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, and then the stupid judge, because she is stupid. I'm sorry.
There's a lot of that going around.
Yeah, there's a lot of stupid judges going around.
I've tried to be generous with her. I can't anymore. Stupid judge says, well, then would you be okay if he brought in some troopers or some police investigators to come and testify that the investigation was done really well? And he goes, do it. Yes, please do it. He goes, you know what that's called? A battle of the experts. And we're all for it. And then she's like, well, you don't need to insult the other side, because everybody kind of starts laughing. He's like, it's not an insult. And then she says, get this. She then says, well, do you have some case law in Massachusetts that says you can bring in this FBI expert to testify to the integrity of the investigation? And he's like, lady, you just see his mouth drop. And that was it. So we're not even in trial yet.
Thank you so much for the update. That's everything. MLS is trying to get in there. Go ahead, MLS. You get
the last word on this. The most egregious thing is the judge's conduct in this case. So, for example, there was during the first trial, the defense called a medical examiner or something along those lines to say, like, these marks on the arms are consistent with a dog bite, not a car accident. Well, the state or the Commonwealth wants to exclude that and or bring in their own expert. Their own expert isn't even qualified in the medical field. I think it's like a dog wrangler or something stupid like that. And the judge says, yeah, okay, yeah, no problem. You can bring that person in to testify about dog bites. Dog
behavioralist.
Behavioralist, yeah. It's just nonsense. This judge is allowing everything in that favors the Commonwealth and is running the defense through the ringer. And this judge is absolutely one of the worst judges I have ever seen. And Dani, you were spot on with the first hearing, which was the judge in Turtle Boy's case. He's being criminally charged too, but they were trying to get at his phone to show that Karen Reed was communicating with him during the pendency of this case as some sort of consciousness of guilt. And the judge wasn't having any of it. He was like, well, why? How is this relevant to the Karen Reed prosecution? This doesn't make sense. Commonwealth, tell me how this makes sense. and then you jump right back to Bev, and it's just all, oh yeah, absolutely, yeah, no problem. We can do that for you, Commonwealth.
You could tell the prosecutor's never been asked a question by judges, or if he has, it's been a long time, because when he was asked basic questions about like, well, how is this relevant? He kind of stuttered and stumbled. Okay, well, who had the phone in the first place? Okay, and then who had the phone? I don't know. He literally says, I don't know. And the judge is like, well, then how can I allow this in? And he goes, well, because judge. Well, it was so bad.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I'm looking at the comments, because I am looking at the comment section, even though I hate all you comment people, but I'm looking at the comments and I'm pulling them up, as you can see, and reading them. So this is a nice little transition. Unrelated. Can we deport Legal Eagle? Now, the next topic we want to talk to, Legal Eagle, I assume he has a very different opinion to what everybody else on the panel is going to say. So the next one is First Amendment protections for non-citizens. For those of you who know, there's a case of Mahmoud Kahil. Now, if you guys watch Legal Eagle's video, he's saying it is horrible. They're deporting him. This is, fascism. So for those of you who don't know, Joe has been covering this case immensely, because I've been watching Joe's nightly little streams. So Joe,
really, you sit there in the dark. You sit there quietly in the background.
You know, I like to catch up, because I watch Viva's streams too, because I like to catch up on who's doing left and rights and center. Because for me personally, I like to be grounded, so I like to watch my right wing commentators and my left wing commentators.
Now a plug for ground news.
Yeah, but with Joe. So tell us about this case.
I want to hear Ron's take on this.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, whoever.
Yeah, if I can. Yeah, I know Ron. My take. I've been saying my take a lot. I wonder what your take is about, is this a First Amendment issue, or is this more of an immigration issue?
Well, first, let me just give people the background so everybody understands what we're talking about before we just get into it. So this person, he is a lawful green card holder, which means a permanent residence card. So he is here permanently. Now, that green card is a privilege. The government doesn't have to give you a green card. They give it to you based on a privilege. It's essentially like a driver's license. A driver's license is a privilege. The green card is a privilege that can be revoked by the government at any time, essentially for any reason. So this person was very critical to Israel. He was going to like Columbia. I forgot. It's one of the New York schools.
Very critical of Israel. He's a supporter of Hamas.
Supporter of Hamas. Let's just make it very clear. So I'm sorry. I don't want to color it. He's a supporter of Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization. So he's doing all this. Now, he was very careful and not to break any laws, but eventually he was arrested. And now he's scheduled for the deportation. And the argument that he's making is that he's being deported based on his speech. Now, even though his speech the government supposedly doesn't like, but his argument is that they can't deport me based on my speech, but the government's saying we can deport you for any reason, and we don't have to give a reason. So there it is. I'm sorry. So go ahead, Ron, and please, if I messed up something,
but they do give a reason. I think that's important to know, and I also think it's important to know it was a little bit more than just free speech. It was also his actions while on campus a year ago. So go ahead, Ron.
Well, can you just specify that, Dani, as far as the actions and
yeah, so that people know what was going on. So about a year ago, there were protests going on campus, and we don't know. I think at the time he had his student visa, and in order to maintain a student visa, you have to be enrolled in school. And he was suspended from school because he was supporting a Hamas supporting organization that took over the school, shut down portions of the school, engaged in all sorts of what's the word where you destroy stuff? You destroy property.
Looting.
Vandalism. Yes. So the group had been involved in vandalism. They had also camped out in tents, and he had appointed himself the negotiator between these riotous school members and the school administration. And they said, if you take this path, we will suspend you, and you will lose your your lawful status here. Now, he was married, but he did not have a green card at that time. So he was here still on his visa. So they could have deported him at that time for continuing to live in the United States despite not attending school under a student visa. But they didn't. The reason that they gave, or at least that the State Department gave, was that he presented a risk to international conflict, or basically he was making problems internationally, which is one of the reasons that you can actually deport someone under the law. Like I said, there were other hooks under the Alien Act, but this is the hook that they used. And then during a further interview with the Secretary of State, Secretary Rubio basically said, well, we don't really need a reason. We can kind of do it for any reason, which is also kind of true. But there are some very small limitations on that. So I want to hear Ron's thinking, but that's my understanding of the entire case as I've read it.
Go ahead, Ron. It's all you.
There is no First Amendment issue. The issue that the free speech people are talking about is a broader preference for it shouldn't be the case that in America, the things a person says can result in state action against him. The law is very clear. It's not the case, as many people say on X, that non-citizens don't have First Amendment rights. That's not true. Criminal law people, you know, there are all kinds of due process rights and constitutional rights that even illegal immigrants have. But immigration law, the Supreme Court has confirmed this many times, gives a great deal of discretion to the executive over the conditions under which a non-citizen may remain in the United States. And one of the things that the administration has been champing at the bit to do has been to get rid of people who are supporters of terrorist organizations. The thrust of what you're seeing on the internet, boy, some are really bothering me a lot. Got to turn off the ringer. Sorry, guys. The people who, and what they're saying is, people like my friend Mark Randazza, free speech absolutists. Mm-hmm. He even said, this is how thinly Mark, my brother from another mother, we're very close. When Ron says we're very close, that means he's lent me money. Okay. Mark says, I acknowledge that the Homeland Security can prevent someone from getting into the country if they lie on their application, if they're terrorist supporters, all the things. But once they're here, I have no, I will never support the government taking action against someone because of what they say. That's an interesting position. At least it gives him something, a very tiny little peak to stand on, but it's silly. Because what that says is wait until you get into the country to start subverting our institutions and our domestic peace. So there is no First Amendment right. The only question is whether.
But what about the notion? So I'll straw man the other side, so you can, because I want to.
Yeah. Let's hear it, man.
So the Supreme Court affords visitors to this country the same civil rights as Americans. That's what Supreme Court does. This seems to chill free speech by saying if you engage in free speech the way you would if you were an American citizen, in that case you're at risk of being evicted from the country. So how is this not a free speech issue when it seems clearly designed to chill free speech?
It's a free speech issue. It's just not a First Amendment issue. Just like getting censored on Twitter or Facebook is a free speech issue, but it's not a First Amendment issue.
What?
So we're all entitled to our views about what policies should be instituted to maximize free speech.
Well, can you explain the distinction you're making between?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Free speech and First Amendment. Yeah.
There are legal rights, which may be constitutional, may be statutory. You have legal rights. which in many cases are consistent with, like the First Amendment protects free speech, except under certain circumstances. But the free speech right in this particular case, I mean, in other words, it's unquestionable that this is a free speech issue. That's why Mark Randazza can take this position. It's a free speech issue, says Mark. I say anyone standing on the soil of these United States of America should know that he can say whatever he wants, no matter where he's from, and we can handle it. We can take it. To which I say, that's something you might like us to say, but the law doesn't say that. The law doesn't. So it's a free speech issue. If you say, I want free speech to go, for example, just to keep it really simple, free speech is subject to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. It is nonetheless a restriction. So therefore, it's a restriction of free speech. The First Amendment and free speech are not coterminous. It's sort of like, it's like long-arm jurisdiction. Constitution says you can go all this far if you want to bring someone into your state to sue them. And New York State, for example, says we don't want to go that far. We actually don't want to go as far. We don't want to go to the constitutional limit. First Amendment says free speech is a thing. It's a thing in the abstract. We won't permit, so we don't afford free speech to enemies of our country when those enemies. Now we have plenty of domestic enemies. I mean, there are bona fide, awful, terrible, despicable people who are citizens of the United States who say things that are every bit as bad. And let's abstract for the purpose of this one guy and say that he's not. There's no conduct involved. It's only speech, only expression. Those people have a First Amendment right to be SOBs, to be terrible people, and to talk about how bad they are, and to encourage people to do things that not illegal things. That's a right that they have. But if you are a green card holder, America says, okay, you're not a citizen, but you can live here. You can sleep on my couch. You can sleep on my couch forever. But if you start shitting on the couch, you start kicking the cat, you start ordering pizzas with my credit card, or you're just looking at me funny, you're going. So yes, the answer to the question is yes.
The way I understand it, the way I would have explained the distinction, and maybe you would agree with this, because I'm still not sure I understand your answer to the question of the difference between free speech and First Amendment. The way I would have answered that question if someone asked me, and I'm wondering if you would agree with me on this take, that the First Amendment protects you from potential criminal liability, and like that you say something, we know that if you're an American citizen, you can say something, you're not going to be thrown in prison for it unless you break certain boundaries. And similarly, if you're a visitor to this country, you're not going to be thrown in prison unless you break the exact same boundaries as an American citizen.
Well, however, any kind of adverse government, adverse government action against you.
Civil.
So if it's any adverse government action, this is where I'm getting confused by what you're saying, Ron, because if there's any adverse government action, it's very hard to understand that distinction between free speech and First Amendment.
Because the free speech is not the law. The First Amendment is the law. Free speech is what's protected under certain circumstances by the First Amendment, but it's not protected entirely. Just like,
oh, I get what you're saying. Can I maybe? So Ron is saying free speech as a principle is all encompassing. But the First Amendment is limited. It's protected speech. Only certain categories of protected speech.
No, that's right. That really is that is the term.
So he's making the distinction between free speech, which is anything anybody says, and protected speech, which is legal under the First Amendment. Is that exactly what you're saying, Ron?
Yeah. Although in this case, it's not the content of the speech, but the well, no, it is. We are judging the content. It is viewpoint specific, and just as we say that the German American Bund was a group of American Nazis, many of whom were second or third generation Americans whose parents were immigrants from Germany. There was people don't realize the extent to which the Midwest was settled by German immigrants in the 1900s. And many of whom spoke German at home. And they were every bit as Germanophilic as Zionist, these people with Israel flags on their houses and who speak Hebrew at home and all. It was the same kind of country within a country kind of culture. A lot of them joined the German-American Bund, not all of them by any stretch of the imagination. During World War II, they were entitled to express themselves, but if they would have invited Joseph Goebbels to come here and somehow he would have gotten in on a student visa or something, right? He would have gotten in. We're saying the absolutist free speech position would be, he's here. Let him tell Americans why Germany should defeat America and how they can cooperate with, the war effort to undermine America's. No, so which brings up a point, right? There's one of the issues in this case is that there is an argument, or at least there was an argument, we thought, until somebody read all the way down, which is the Alien Enemies Act was supposed to be about protecting the country in time of war. And there's no declared war. But actually the statute says otherwise. The statute gives the president the ability to declare categories of persons alien enemies. It is what it is.
Now, I go ahead. Someone's about to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, there's a difference between speech and action too. Action isn't necessarily speech, especially like looting and rioting and things like that. And then when you're on when you have a green card, maybe it's easier to think of like this. When you're on probation or bond in a criminal case, right? There's certain actions that you can do freely when you're not. And then when you are on bond or probation, there's certain actions you can. Consuming alcohol might be one of them. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that you don't have a fundamental constitutional right to consume alcohol if you're over 21 or whatever argument you want to make. But you have to mind your P's and Q's. You have to follow the rules. And technicalities, such as violating any of those little restrictions, can be grounds for deportation. Yeah.
I do want to. I obviously
I have the law pulled up here, you guys.
Well, first I'm going to disagree with a couple of the premises that have been said, because I do agree with some, but I disagree with others. For instance, if I am going to a state DMV's office to get a driver's license and they deny me, and I say, why do you deny me? Well, we can deny you for any reason, but we don't give black people driver's licenses, right? But it's a privilege. They can deny me for any reason. So if I go and say they denied me because I'm black, then obviously that's going to trigger it, right? You can't just deny me for any reason. There are certain reasons. The same thing with getting a green card. If I went and wanted the green card and they said, we're denying you because you're black, it's even though they can deny you for any reason, that's one of those reasons that they can't deny you for. They have to give it to you. And also now, when you do have the green card, you do have the same due process rights and civil rights. There are 4 cases. There's I pulled them up. Bridges v. Wixton, because I'm doing a video on it. Detroit Petrus, Ashcroft. And there's 4 cases particularly where the same thing happened, where someone was arrested and detained by ICE. ICE was going to deport them because one guy, for instance, he was part of the Communist Party, and the government didn't like the Communist Party. But he didn't break any laws, because even in the case at hand, the guy didn't break any laws. He's saying he did a whole bunch of stuff, but he's never been found guilty or anything. So he hasn't broken any laws, but he's saying things that we don't like. In that particular case, they admit the government can withdraw green cards, can send these people back, but it cannot do it based off of protected speech. Now, I think the issue here is as soon as we start going into, because we're all lawyers, we all know the Brandenburg standard. Whenever you go into the contents of the speech and say we don't like this type of speech versus that type of speech, you're in a Brandenburg. And Brandenburg is a pretty high standard, and I don't know why we would want to lower that standard for this one particular case, because if you have Democrats who are now in power who now flip this standard on his head and say, well, listen, I don't like this guy because he supports Trump. So you know what? we're going to remove his green card and send him back. I would think that would be just as bad as this case. Now, don't
Are you
get me
asking
wrong.
from a legal perspective or from a moral perspective?
I'm saying from a legal perspective, whenever you start talking about unless the speech meets the Brandenburg standard, but if you're talking about this person is saying something I specifically don't like MLS, he said, the analogy of being in the house, you can't loop on the rug, you can't do this, you can't do that. I agree with all that, but also in that same house, I can say whatever I want, and if the government says, "Hey, I don't like that type of speech," then guess what? It can't kick me out because their own constitutional rules say they can't do it. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying we have to be careful with what we allow, and I do have the cases here pulled up.
I agree
that this happens.
That speech is protected. I would say that speech is protected. Everyone is covered under these constitutional and protected rights.
That's true. Let's keep in mind we're not talking about prior restraint here. We're not saying that by virtue of being a green card holder, we could arrest him to take him off the street to prevent him from speaking, or we can shut down his printing press. We're not saying that. We're saying we're just going to remove him from the country, and he can speak from wherever he wants to.
I disagree with you guys. You guys are acting like we apply civil liberties to non-citizens and citizens equally and fairly the same way. We simply don't. And the case that I'm citing for this one is Reno v. AADC. It was written by it was authored by Scalia. And it says, when a foreign national's continuing presence in the U.S. violates immigration laws, the government does not need to offend the Constitution by deporting the foreign national for an additional reason that they are believed to be a member of an organization that supports terrorist activity. More generally, when deportation is sought because of an act committed by a foreign national, they are not being punished for the act, but merely being held to the terms for which they were admitted. So does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
That's what I want people to understand here.
Oh my God.
Well, hold on. Can you read that first sentence again? There's something that you said in the first sentence.
So it doesn't offend the Constitution. That's what he's saying here. You don't even need to go to saying, the government's going to offend the Constitution by deporting a foreign national for an additional reason that they were believed to be a member of an organization that supports terrorist activity.
Well, Dani, can you?
The analysis is going too far. That's my point. The way in which we apply constitutional law, the way in which the Supreme Court has traditionally applied constitutional rights to non-citizens is different than how they apply it to citizens because they are here conditionally. So their rights are not unconditional in the same way that they are for citizens. So what they can say, what the government can come in and say every single time is, we're not punishing you for what you said. We're just holding you to the standard that you agreed to when you signed the form and said, I agree to follow all of these rules, even though it's a voluntary giving up of those rights. That is what you are doing. You are voluntarily waiving those rights to free speech by signing those documents. I know it's hard it's not fair. It's not just. I'm just telling you the truth.
Hold on. I just want to ask Dani, can you read that first part again? Because there was something you said there that maybe I missed. The first part of what you read. Can you read that one more time?
When a foreign national's continuing presence in the U.S. violates immigration laws.
Full stop.
Right there.
Full stop. So everything else you said after that doesn't apply.
But you have to understand. No.
Dani, let me finish what I'm saying. Everything you said after that point is irrelevant to this case because he hasn't violated any immigration law.
He has violated it by engaging in that activity.
Hold on. He has not violated any laws yet, and the reason why is because you're innocent until proven guilty in this country. He has not been adjudicated.
No, not under immigration.
Hold on. Let me finish. Let me finish, Dani. Let me finish. There are due process rights, right? Yes. So if you're accusing this immigrant of something, if you're saying he's done something wrong, he then has a right to due process. He has a right.
He has a right to procedural due process. He has a right. Substantive due process. You guys need to go and actually look at the law.
Dani,
I'm telling you, this is the most fascinating aspect of U.S. law is immigration law.
You keep cutting me off. Due process minimally in the United States is two parts. It's notice, right? It's opportunity to be heard. It's notice and opportunity to be heard. Those are the two things, the minimal due process you can get. There's a standard that the Supreme Court.
Yes.
So in this particular case, if you're alleging that he has violated, he then has the right to be noticed and an opportunity to be heard. That's the minimum due process.
And what is the standard?
Everything
Nate?
after what you just said
when you're
doesn't apply to this case.
Hold on, Nate. At the hearing, what is the standard? Because you missed a key aspect of this that is very much alive and well in immigration law that does not exist in any other law when it comes to U.S. citizens. You said something that is fundamentally wrong when it comes to deportation proceedings. And this is why I say substantive due process versus procedural due process makes a huge difference here. The Supreme Court has held you have the right to procedural due process. But when you sign on to your green card paperwork and it's not fair and it's not right, what you are doing is you are waiving your rights under the Constitution. You're saying, I agree, I don't have those rights. If I violate any immigration law, which includes supporting foreign terrorism, then I am here illegally. The government's presumption is not that you are innocent. The presumption is that you are guilty. The presumption, in effect, the presumption is that you are unworthy. Hold on, listen.
Okay.
It's that you are unworthy of obtaining a benefit. It is the immigrant, the onus and the burden is on the immigrant to prove that they can and are worthy of receiving an immigration benefit. So it goes full circle. If you just stop with, well, if they're here and they're violating immigration law, then we can do whatever we want. If you stop there, you're missing the final piece of that. Mm-hmm. And it is that final piece that's the clincher here, which is they are not being punished for what they're saying. It's merely that they're being held to the terms for which they were admitted. So the minute you violate immigration law, whatever constitutional illusions of constitutional rights that you have go out the window. One of those laws is that you are not allowed to support terrorist organizations. You are not allowed to verbally support terrorist organizations. That case is back in 1999. So this is pre-2001 era. So I think this is really important for people to understand that this is a long-term held precedent. It's not fair to immigrants. I'm coming from the perspective of someone who has dealt with these deportation proceedings. And I will tell you guys, the law is backwards. And you have to get into district court. And then in district court, you are allowed a proceeding. You're allowed to put on evidence. District court judges tend to apply the law a little more fairly, which is good. We want to get outside of USCIS. Totally agree. But when it comes to deportation and you have the Secretary of State coming down and saying, I have the power and authority to do this under this act, he's absolutely right, and he will do that legally speaking.
Well, Dani,
and there's nothing a judge can really do.
I'm just saying it's just for my own cred.
Sure.
In absolutely no way, if the government makes any allegation against you, it is on the government to prove that allegation in any court. I don't care what anybody tells you. If the government makes an allegation,
not in immigration law.
If the government is making an allegation about you,
on a benefit.
So hold on, let me just make it very clear. So if the government says you did something wrong, right, and they're going to they have to already have something about it. Like a lot of the people that they're deporting now, for instance, missed their times when they had to go in front of the judge. They ran and all this other stuff. So that's what allows them to deport them. You're on a deportation order. We're deporting you now. But
yeah, they've already done
the due process. What we're talking about now is somebody who hasn't had that due process done. They're in the midst of doing that due process. Correct. And the argument that they're making is twofold. One side of it is arguing that, yes, he's guilty of doing this, and we are removing him because of that guilt. And the other side is saying he's guilty of saying things that are unpopular, and they're removing him based on that unpopular speech. So that's why I stopped you when you said guilty, because that hasn't been determined yet. Only thing that's been determined is that he's going through this process. Now we can just say he's guilty and just to make, but that hasn't been determined by any. He hasn't committed any crime, and he hasn't been found guilty of.
How is he found guilty? Because
he doesn't need to be found guilty.
That's the point.
Guilty, liable, or whatever the standard is.
What process is necessary for that? You think that you need to have a jury, a unanimous jury, find his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt?
Since you asked, this was called the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act, and they have administrative judges, and generally the administrative judges take that, but then you have the whole standard for. But so yeah, that's generally the way you do it. You have an administrative judge under the APA. So I don't know if you know what the APA is, but that's generally how they do it. So all immigration judges are administrative procedure judges who actually work for the president, not the judiciary. But you know, I'm sorry, I studied actually taught the APA. I taught some of this stuff
too, and that's why
I'm assuming
it's good that he gets an appeal to a district court judge. The APA
says that exactly.
But what I'm telling you is that even then, the onus is on the deportee, on the immigrant, to show the government that he is worthy of obtaining a benefit. If at any point the government can come in and say, no, you violated the terms of your immigration, then they can kick him out. That's it. And all there's no record. The government just says you violated the terms of your immigration, of your thing. We don't have any evidence or anything. We're just saying it, and they can remove you. Correct. They can start those proceedings using that, and then what they
no. You said they can remove. Now we're saying starting proceedings. I'm
saying he becomes eligible for deportation.
And then what happens?
As soon as the government says he is.
And then what happens? He has to go in front
of
a third party.
In front of a judge. Okay, a district court judge, hopefully on appeal, right? A federal district court judge. He'll be able to go before them and argue his case. And then the judge, though, starts with the presumption that he is not worthy of that benefit, that the government got it right. That's where the presumption starts. He then has to argue the opposite of that. Is he going to be able to do that? In my opinion, no. It is a very, very strong and hard and difficult burden for immigrants to overcome. It is difficult because you don't have these absolute rights to free speech in the same way you would if you were a U.S. citizen, because you waive those rights when you come in and sign a paper saying, yes, I will follow all immigration laws. Immigration laws are convoluted. They are very, very broadly interpreted. They are extremely gray. It basically is, if you look at an immigration officer sideways, they can kick you out of the country. It starts to make you eligible for deportation. It's very unfortunate. It's not fair. Do I wish that there was a better standard, a more secure standard that all attorneys would agree is fair and just and provides that? Then yeah.
Well, hold on. I think it's perfectly fair.
Oh, Ron has. God's going to try to get him. So, but I want to say, I think you're just plain out wrong. I just got to say it. I think you're plain out wrong.
Do you think she's wrong about what happens? What do you think?
No. Well, all right. So yes, she's wrong. Definitely wrong about how the process.
But Nate, you've been involved in your criminal defense, right?
Criminal defense, yes. Criminal defense.
You have an individual who's on probation, right?
Yes.
And if they get charged with a violation of probation, they have a ton of restrictions.
Yes.
It's they essentially have to prove their innocence at that point. Right. While the state government still has the technical burden, it's a huge burden to overcome. But you have to mind your P's and Q's. It's the same sort of situation here.
I disagree.
You're here at the grace of the government, and you've agreed to abide by these terms.
Well, I disagree with two things. Number one, if you come here on a visa or even on a green card, you don't sign away your constitutional rights. That's nonsense. And the case Yick Wo, we all learned that in law school. It's a fundamental case in Supreme Court. Yick Wo stands for the proposition that you don't have to be a
Nate, wait. So the case
hold on, let me finish. Just let me finish. All right, go ahead.
Well, the case that Dani cited from 1999 seems to imply that this is more of a contractual analysis as opposed to a constitutional right analysis. Now, let me say this. When you sign a DNR or a non-compete with an employer, they're effectively removing your freedom of speech rights, right? Because otherwise you're not restricted, but you've agreed to abide by the terms of that agreement. It's the same sort of thing.
No, the difference, there are two differences. Number one, there are certain rights you can give up and certain rights you can't give up. We all know that, right? Even when, for instance, people give up their rights to freedom when they sign a plea bargain, right? I'm giving up my right to freedom and go away. So I'm not saying you cannot give away your rights, but the government can't condition something.
But you don't have the right to be here.
The government can't condition something. You don't have a right to a driver's license, but the government doesn't have a right to say I can't have one because I'm black. Right?
No, but it does have the right to say if you say
Dani, you keep cutting me off. Dani, you keep cutting me off. The government can't stop me because I'm black. The government can't stop you because you're a woman. And the government can't say, because Nate, you said something 2 weeks ago, we don't want to give you the privilege of driven. That's ridiculous. And we all know that. Now, when it comes to immigration, yes, you are a visitor. You are coming here. But there is nowhere that says you do not have any civil constitutional rights because you have a green card. There is nowhere. And if you guys can show me that law, then you can shut me up. I'll pull it up right now. If you can show me the law that says if you're an immigrant to get a green card, you have no you waive all your constitutional rights. Show me that, and I'll shut up. But I know it's not going to be shown because
people aren't arguing that, Nate. Nate, we're not arguing that you don't have
when you come here,
rights.
you give up all your rights, your constitutional rights.
I'm saying that you are waiving it, and MLS has it right.
Waive it.
Contractual. Hold on.
Let me see where you waive it. Just pull up the law and let me.
Where you waive it is conditional upon your entrance and continual presence in the United States. That's the deal.
Dani, I'm calling BS on that. And I'm asking you for a citation. Give me the citation.
I did. I just did.
No,
Reno.
So give me. You're saying. I'm saying. Give me the citation to the law that says that. But go ahead, Dani.
Sure.
Go ahead, Joe.
Reno VAADC. This is 525 US.
Reno
471 1999.
Go ahead, Joe. Do me a favor. Put it in the side chat.
Sure. I'll put it in.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
We can take a look at it later.
So it's interesting that I intuitively came to what this Reno case without ever having seen it. I appreciate greatly Dani calling that case to my attention. You've done phenomenal work today, Dani.
Yeah,
really.
That's a good case.
Dani, you've done really exceptional work. I've been debating this. I was on a pretty small channel debating this topic last week. Next week, I'm actually supposed to be on Tim Pool Culture Wars debating this very issue, and I certainly plan on citing that case, Reno VAADC, because I intuitively came to what the case Dani cited, where I basically said everyone understands that when it comes to immigration, that the United States can say we don't want you here for a myriad of reasons, where the threshold is for where they would be violating that is very low. Meaning they can't say we don't want the Jews, we don't want blacks, we don't want Muslims. They can't do that. But if there's any sort of legitimate type of rational basis, that a reasonable basis, that would be a basis for them to legitimately keep someone, say we're not letting you come into this country. And what my point is that once we give them a green card and a visa, to say that we are still going to hold them to the same standards while they are a visitor here, that they were required to pass to gain admission here, that is a logical and normal position to take. And that's essentially what Reno is saying. The Reno case that Dani cited is basically saying we're holding you to the exact same standards that we had for you before admission. And you can't just break it 10 minutes after you get here. It's very different from someone who gets naturalized and now has full citizenship status, same as you or me or anyone who's a daughter of the American Revolution, that they now are now conferred upon them that blessing of being an American citizen. And at that point, they don't have to have that restriction any longer. But until they attain that, they are still in the same, they still have to abide by the same threshold standards that they needed to abide by in order to gain admission. That's what Reno says. And that's why this is not a matter of like, I have free speech rights with the free speech rights. And I think it ends up manifesting, as I was saying, to run and manifest for this guy in that we can't shut down your printing press, we can't throw you in prison, we can't do all this other stuff, but based on immigration law, we can say you've now breached the threshold that we had for you to gain admission here, and that's why there's nothing unconstitutional about us saying goodbye, we're done with you.
So just so we're clear, so in other words, no matter what he says, in other words, they can deport him even if they don't like his speech. Let's say if the government says we don't like his speech, so we're going to deport him. You guys are saying that would be legal.
Well,
if it violates immigration law, it doesn't
violate immigration law. He just says something. The government says we don't like what he says, but what we're doing, we're going to say we're going to.
Well, it still has to be a violation of the contractual terms. So if it is,
right, then
it is, and if it's not, then it's not.
It's really unfortunate, Nate. This is something I've been talking about.
I think it's actually a healthy thing.
And you're free to disagree. That's okay. And I could see the argument. I see the public policy argument from the other side. I just think from, this is Dani's bleeding liberal heart speaking from a human perspective, from a very human perspective, these are people who are paying a lot of money in a lot of cases, and there's no guarantees in the process. And they give up their whole lives and dedicate everything to coming here. There's so many people who try and take the legal route and get screwed over by immigration law because it's just not very clear. And they put, I mean, I'm talking, there were deportations going on during the Obama administration of people who had put down the wrong addresses and wrong dates on different applications. So it was an easy fix. They could have fixed it, right? But even with an immigration lawyer, even in district court, they were still found to be not worthy of receiving an immigration benefit. So,
hold on. Before we go, I read that. I was reading through the case real quick. It's called the LA8. That's the case. But even in that case, some of those deportations.
What's the LA8?
That the LA8 is a case for Reno versus American Arab Anti-Discrimination Council. Some of those people in that case with the LA8, actually their deportations were overturned on free speech grounds. So even the case that you just cited, some of the people in that case were overturned based on free speech. So Dani, you're right. You found the perfect case because, again, just like in this case, if based on free speech grounds, the government cannot deport you just because they don't like. Now, they did deport some of these people because they had ties to the terrorist organizations. But in that case you cited, they did overturn some deportations based on free speech grounds.
Sure, because they're saying your speech didn't violate your terms. That's the thing. And so that's why I'm saying you're right. It's not as though we're saying they don't have rights. That's what I'm saying. I'm not arguing that they don't have constitutional rights. What I'm saying is that to a large extent, those constitutional rights are now tailored and cut down in size. They're not as expansive as U.S. citizens would get, and they are applied very differently. And the way the courts apply them, even in that case, as you said, is applied differently depending on exactly what is said and what that relationship is. So that's where it's going to get into the nitty gritty. We'll have to see how this comes down. But if he said something and he doesn't even need to say anything in this case because that's not the angle the government's taking. They're taking from a totally different statute. But I'm saying even if you were to take the free speech angle of it, it's not looking good for him. On the other side of it, if you take the statute that the U.S. government is citing, which is that it looks bad on U.S. foreign policy and it's against U.S. foreign policy to continue to have him here based on what he said and the way he's behaving, we can kick him out. That's a really expansive aspect of the law, and the State Department can absolutely do that. So you're muted, Nate.
You're muted.
I'm thinking at this particular time, like I agree with a lot of the principles that you guys said. I do agree, and I don't think it's absolute on either side. I think the context matters, and I don't see any difference because I understand what you guys are saying, and I do agree. If I'm saying I love Hamas and I'm a green card holder, then that's grounds for them to bring me in front of a court and say, well, we think that that I agree with, but I don't agree with the fact that if the government doesn't like something that someone who has a green card says, they can deport them based on that speech. I think that the case that you cited stands for that particular effect. The other cases, there are like 4 other cases that I just found that also stand for that effect. But like you're saying, if it violates immigration law specifically, now in this particular case, it doesn't seem, the question is, how has he violated immigration law? And I think that's the point. The government's alleging that he has ties with terrorist organizations. He's saying that he doesn't have ties. He's saying, I don't have ties. I just support this particular thing. So that's where I think the crust is. If the judge believes that, if the judge believes
the INA code that he's violated by supporting terrorist organizations,
yes, but the government has to prove that he does that. Like for instance, there was a case. I don't know if you guys know about the woman from Brown University, the professor that just came in, and she was at the airport. She was good. She's a professor and everything. She came through the airport, and she's actually pretty well known in Boston. They looked at her phone. And on her phone, she went to a Hamas funeral. She has all this stuff. And she tried to delete it and put it in her delete folder. So they found it.
She was an H-1B.
And she was an H-1B. She was all legal. Mm-hmm. And they said, here is the evidence on your phone saying that blah, 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 blah. So we're not and we're denying you entry. That I understand, but that I don't think you have that here. Even though he's saying these things with a green card holder, I just don't see, because he's not trying to get in.
Taking that approach, Nate. They're hanging their hat on a completely separate code altogether. They're saying this isn't about his free speech. We're not even touching what he said.
But even if it was, that's a factual argument, not a legal argument.
Right. And so I'm saying if they were to take the route of free speech, then it would come down to a factual argument.
So they're hanging on his conduct with respect to starting vandalism in the
not the vandalism.
No.
Supporting terrorist organizations.
I'm saying that they could do that, but what they're hanging it on, Joe, is this very strange INA rule that says in the code, it basically says that the Secretary of State, once he or she has determined that their presence here in the United States would jeopardize foreign interests and foreign policy, they can have them removed. And so,
really?
Yeah, and that's the code they're using. I'll have to pull it up and send it over to you, Joe.
I would really appreciate if you could.
Yeah.
The next topic that I'm assuming is going to cause some issues is the validity of the presidential pardon signed by Autopen and the presidential authority to revoke the predecessor's pardons. So this one is going to be now everything that so just so everybody understands, the last days of the Biden administration, the Heritage Foundation took all the pardons that were publicly available on the Federal Register and did an analysis of all the signatures, and all the signatures matched identical to like almost impossible for someone to sign that many documents exactly the same. So President Trump said it was auto-penned. Auto-penning, he was saying that Biden didn't have the mental capacity to know what he was doing. So that was a part of it. And because it was auto-penned, Biden didn't actually sign it. And on top of that, Biden didn't have the capacity to know what he was doing. He says that these are all null and void, and the Justice Department is going to test the validity of these pardons in court. So now to the panelists, do you think these pardons can be overturned, and what do you think about the argument?
Well, first and foremost, I think all of us would agree that the use of an auto pen is no different, as long as it's with the authority of the purported signer. That is absolutely no different from his own hand signing the signature. So we all, any of us who litigate and have to e-file documents, I imagine everyone has their own signature on file that they just attach to a document, and in theory you can have some paralegal doing it for you, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and has the same power and effect as long as it's with the assent of the purported signer. There's nothing wrong with that. Our country would be our legal system would be operating far slower than it currently is if we did not allow for that. So I think that it's a good thing that we have that and allow that. The question then becomes, as far as his mental state. There are two elements to his mental state which are important. One is, can he form cognitive thought? And the other is, was he even told about any of this? Those are two different questions. And I would say that with respect to his inability to form cognitive thought, even though you and I and everyone may intuitively have watched that man for the last 4 years, and in particular the last 6 months, or at his debates and all his stumblings and all his confusion, and we would question his ability to form cognitive thought at certain points in time. I do think that there are enough moments of him actually looking lucid for 10 seconds at a time that you would struggle legally to invalidate his signature, because you would have to say, that during that moment when that thing was being signed, he had no idea, much like someone who's drunk out of their mind or high on drugs, can't form intent. There's no way you would ever be able to establish that. It's such a difficult thing to establish. Far more likely, with respect to the auto pen issue specifically, is the question as to whether or not they even bothered telling him that they were signing these pardons for him. And with respect to that element of it, at first I thought, how would anyone know whether or not he had that conversation with them? How would that possibly be anywhere? The only way that I would think that this could possibly be an issue for the Trump administration to successfully raise is if Biden's handlers kept very scrupulous records as to his conversations, and every time he crapped his own pants or fell down the stairs or had a conversation about Ukraine or about this and that, and they took very diligent notes about that, which I don't know if they may have, because he's the president of the United States. They may not have been recording him quite so minutely, but if they were recording him that minutely, and you see omissions of any discussions about these pardons, well, then I guess in theory, you could say the fact that it's not there in the record shows that he never talked about it, and they never even bothered telling him about these pardons. I doubt that they were that stupid. I think they probably would have not been as careful about keeping records, and it's like, no, he's having a lid day, we're not going to talk about what he's doing today, and that's why I think that ultimately this is likely a struggle to succeed on this issue. I do think that the pardons are invalid for other bases outside of the Autopen. I don't think that any president, even if he's Sherlock Holmes, has the capacity to pardon a person or any activities that person has taken related to a certain issue for the past 7 years. That to me that's beyond what the power of the pardon is. I think it's inconsistent with what the Constitution says, which says you're pardoning a crime, and you have the ability to pardon a crime, which implies that at least the pardoner must know what crimes he's pardoning, and that's a fatal flaw.
What about the whole Ford pardon of Nixon?
I don't think it was valid.
You don't think it was? Well, okay.
Yeah, Joe's being consistent because he's always said
50 years ago.
Yeah, but Joe's it's effective. Something can be invalid but effective. In other words, it's effective because the DA then says, well, I can't go after him. But really, if they actually had challenged it, they could have gone after them. So I think similarly, and that's one of the things I'm really pleased about this announcement from Trump, in that he's basically saying we're going to test the validity of these pardons, and maybe it's on the auto. And he actually mentioned both. Maybe it's on the Autopen thing, or maybe they're just invalid in general. And I think that invalid in general is legally a stronger attack on these pardons than the Autopen thing.
Hey, I got to jump off. Sorry.
Great talking to you, Dave.
Take care, guys.
The only issue with the pardon seems to be, even if you take away the that part, it also going to see Biden's mental capacity, because I think that's where Trump has the best argument. And even with that, Biden did issue a statement after the pardon, giving a detailed reason about the pardon. So I think it's going to be hard, because for everybody who doesn't know, presidential pardons are valid on their face. It's on the petitioner to show why they are invalid.
You start with the assumption that it's valid.
Yeah, it's valid on his face.
So then you have to knock it out from being valid. Yeah, that's true.
Yes. So do you think Biden actually didn't know he was pardoning these people, or do you guys think, like, what are you guys thoughts on the mental capacity piece of it? Because they're 100% right. If they can show Biden didn't have the wherewithal to know what was going on, then these pardons are no good.
Dan?
Oh, dude, the guy lacked testamentary capacity. He lacked contractual capacity. He didn't know where he was. We have so many witnesses saying the exact same thing who worked either directly with him or directly with the pardons in particular. Who was the witness, Joe, who just came out and said that? There was somebody who came out and said,
the staffer, you're right.
Yeah,
there was one guy who kept going back and forth to Biden. Nobody knew what he wanted. Yeah.
Right. And we have, political opponents, so it's not really helpful, but political opponents who said they met with him and said, Joe, you authorized this and we don't know what to do with it.
Mike Johnson.
And Mike Johnson also, that was a different thing, but Mike Johnson, said that when he asked him why he would stop the export of natural gas to, and he's like, I didn't do that. And he's like, no, you did. He's like, he thinks for a second. He's like, no, I signed a study to look into that. He's like, no, you actually signed off on that. He's like, I didn't know that. That doesn't invalidate this document of a pardon.
Sure.
Because we don't know that even if he was completely illucid when some other order was signed, doesn't mean that he wasn't lucid, since he was never cognitively determined to be mentally incapacitated. You can't, even though you and I might assume it, as far as knocking out this particular pardon, no matter whose pardon you're talking about, it could be Fauci, it could be Adam Schiff, it doesn't matter whose. That individual pardon, to say that he didn't have cognition of it, there's no way for us to, you or me, to know that. The only people who know that were those who were in the room with him at the time it was discussed, if it ever was discussed.
Well, I do want to make mention too about the work that the Heritage Foundation did. Now, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be upset with me, but I did the research. I'm sorry. So the Heritage Foundation took all those documents and took the signatures and put them together and then said, hey, these are all the same. But there's a big issue. Now, the National Archives, I don't know why they do this. And I don't know if you guys they do this anyway. They've done it with Trump, Obama, and I think every president for the past 5 or 6 presidents. So what the National Archives does when someone's elected president, they'll say, well, give us your signature, a prime example of your signature. And they give that to the archives. Now, when something like a pardon comes down, the White House or whoever gives them the pardon paper, they'll send it to the National Archives and they'll take that generic signature and place it on the document and make it available for everyone online to see. The archivists have already said this. So even with some of Trump's documents, you'll notice that all the signatures are identical because they're not the original document. So even now that we're talking about Biden's, so the Heritage Foundation got all the documents that they're made the analysis from the National Register and the National Archives. So that now makes it, now that I think kills the whole, well, it does a lot to harm the argument of the Autopen, because the National Archives says, well, those documents, we actually put a prefabricated signature on all those documents.
Interesting point. Yeah.
So
can you guys explain to me, if they can prove incapacitation, but they don't actually do anything about it for 4 years, where, because we've had other presidents who've been in this situation, and I know that we have Supreme Court cases that say it doesn't matter and their orders are still in legal effect, or what they did as president at least is still has legal effect.
The 2 presidents you're talking about is Woodrow Wilson,
yeah,
and Theodore Roosevelt, not Teddy, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, his last 2 years, where essentially his wife was running the country, because he would be like in the room and she'd be like, give me the papers and go inside and come and everything is done. Eleanor Roosevelt.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said Jill Biden for a second.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, yeah.
Probably Joe Biden too. So, but that actually happened. And with Woodrow Wilson, he had a stroke,
right,
and the same thing. He was like in the room and she would come out and all of a sudden she had all the problems to solve. So, but in that case, unless, even with the Supreme Court, in that case, even with legislation signed or whatever, you'd have to show at the time that they were doing it, they were incapacitated. And I'm assuming that's going to be, who do you interview? Or is his wife going to say he's incapacitated? Like, who's going to say it?
I mean, she's supposed to. Well, actually, she's not supposed to. I think it's I need to pull out my Constitution, but I think it's, what is it? The
cabinet, half the cabinet. Well,
one of the cabinet, yeah. Right? Someone in the cabinet's supposed to notify Congress, and so I'm wondering, is there any recourse if they don't? Like, if everybody was in on it, everybody just kept their mouth shut. I mean, let's say they have hearings and they drag all these people in and they have a case. I'm glad it's being challenged. I agree with you, Joe. But even if they do, what sort of is the legal recourse at that point? I would
there's no legal recourse.
There wouldn't be.
Right. So I would like, though, for the, there's only one pardon that I care about, and that's Fauci. And so if we can challenge that, that will make me a very happy girl.
Now, also
very,
remember,
very happy girl.
I think everybody also remembers too, pardons take jurisdiction from the federal courts. So really, you can't even really apply a criminal case. Like the court, I don't even know how you'd even bring a criminal case, because the first motion to dismiss is you don't have jurisdiction because of the pardon. So it's going to be very hard to even get over that particular part. But the last
can I ask you guys a quick question about a topic that came up yesterday, and it's starting to get a lot more traction?
Sure.
This thing about Chief Justice Roberts being part of ins of the court.
It's funny. That was literally the next question. Chief Justice Robert responds to President's calls for judicial impeachment.
No, it's a different. This is a different thing. But we'll talk about both. We'll talk about both. I'm talking about claims that he's part of some secret cabal called ins of the court, which there's a lot that they basically are a bunch of attorneys and judges, of which the president of the society is Judge Boasberg, who's the very one who Trump said should be impeached, and that John Roberts lashed back about. and that John Roberts is in this, and Ketanji Brown Jackson is the vice president of this agency, and that they're all, and a thought that a lot of people have is that this is some secret agency which is I guess coordinating with each other to unduly influence the country. Let's call it, we'll just leave it at that, if not in nefarious ways, but certainly to unduly influence the country. Are you guys, as lawyers, I'd never heard of this agency before. Had you guys ever heard of Into the Court before? Have you heard of it before I just mentioned it?
No.
No, but now I'm extremely intrigued, Joe. You got my conspiracy brain going, and I want to know more.
I can give you a link to the particular.
Please do. I will I will happily do a live stream on that. That is interesting.
Right now, Marion Awful is having a big space on X talking about this very issue. So I saw one person who has 130,000 followers who was talking about it. Another attorney I know said this is crap. Into the Court has been around. We started in the UK, and that they have it now. It's basically like Freemasons, but for the legal community. Yeah, it's Freemasons for the legal community. So that's the implication of this whole thing.
MG Law says he's heard of it.
Oh, okay.
Inns of the court, like an inn, like a
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
Yes, I have heard about this in law school.
Okay.
It was briefly brought up. I remember someone had brought it up, and it was a judge. Yes, it was a judge who came to speak at our law school regarding some kind of precedent that was being overturned. I think he was brought. I know it wasn't the Federalist Society who brought him in, because I was the president of the Federalist Society. I would have remembered. I think it was what's the opposite of the Federalist Society called? Constitution League something.
Yes.
Whatever. Yeah, whatever that group is.
Yeah.
They brought in this judge, and I think he brought up Inns of the Court. And then afterwards, we started to discuss it, and he was like, "Oh, it's a sort of a fraternity of the court, not a fraternity per se, but this like honor organization or something akin to, what is it when you're the best in law school?
Golden Key.
Law Review, it's Law Review for us. Law Review.
Right, but Golden Key National Honor Society is for undergraduates.
Yeah, undergrads. But she's at the law school.
For law school.
Oh, law schools usually talk Law Review.
Yeah. So if you're in that sort of group, that's sort of how he described it. But I do remember this. Oh my gosh! Thank you for bringing this. Like, that's a deep memory of mine. Joe,
but do you think there's something? You think there's something nefarious about it? I mean, it
sounds very nefarious, though.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's nefarious, but
it could just be a networking thing. Because I saw an attorney who I've spoken with on Spaces a lot, who was saying, "I'm a member of Inns of the Court. It's not anything. It's a big fat nothing."
Well, maybe we can find out how do you become a member? Like there seems to be a lot.
You have to be recommended by someone. You have to be nominated by someone in order to get in.
Okay.
I'm not going to assume it's nefarious. I'm going to assume that that's something that definitely should have been disclosed, and that people should probably be recusing themselves if they have those sorts of deep relationships. I know that with the Federalist Society, we're always walking a thin line with the judiciary. Like when we have like events at the sorry, you guys, my pregnancy brain has now zapped out. So I'm at the Supreme Court. All I know is that at the Supreme Court, there's alcohol a-flowing. Okay, at each and every single one of those events. I asked for a cranberry vodka, and for comparison, I got this much vodka and this much cranberry. So I can't assume it's nefarious, but what I can say is lawyers drink and drink well. And I met Alito. I will say, even though I think he was drinking, he is one of the most analytical. Like it's sort of like meeting a robot in some ways. The guy, he speaks analytically, he thinks everything he does is da 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 da, and that's sort of his thought processes.
I'm sharing a screen. I'm sharing a screen with you, Nate. I'm sharing a screen with you.
I want to do two things. So after your sheet screen, there's like some rapid fire questions that came up for the thing. So I'm going to go through those so we can get out of here.
Okay.
I'm trying to pull your screen. It says before preventing screen.
Just
Wow,
say, just
remove other- oh, I got to. No, I'm
down the
sorry.
bottom.
They have a new feature here where you just can't do it. Mario, Chief Justice Roberts linked to secretive club with anti-Trump judges. So see, that's a little more color to it now.
Yeah, it's been
Huh.
revealed that Chief Justice John Roberts is part of an elite invite-only group called the American Inns of Court, alongside some of the most openly anti-Trump judges in D.C. The group includes James Boasberg. That's the guy who Trump said should be impeached. He's the president of the chapter that John Roberts is in. And that's the guy that, and when he said he should be impeached, Roberts is like, you shouldn't be talking about impeachment. That's inappropriate. Beryl Howell, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and Amit Mehta, many of whom have ruled against Trump in high-profile cases. Roberts, listed as an honorary bencher of the Middle Temple, is also allegedly linked to a Soros-funded legal fellowship. The revelation follows Roberts' statement defending these judges and rejecting Trump's call for the impeachment, raising major ethical concerns. And I could probably open this up a little bigger if you'd like me to do that. So we
can see it.
Yeah.
I am so
There it is.
intrigued. This is right
benefits
up
of
my alley.
judiciary and enhance the legal profession by joining an American Inn of Courts. Emphasize the importance of an expectation of the highest standards of ethics, civility, and professionalism in the practice of law. Inspire attorneys. Give back to the profession. Build confidence in the courts. Recognize judges. See, none of this is benefits of being of membership.
Oh, I've seen
Network
this
with people.
before in law school. I have seen this. All
See,
right.
I'm not the only. I'm
Yeah,
like,
I
I
have seen
swear
this
we had
before.
this topic in law school. It was
Hey,
brought
what's
up
her
by.
name?
So they
So-
make it
yeah.
sound it's like some sort of group that's designed just to
It's
enhance
like the
your
Golden
opportunity
Key
to network and
It's the
become
Golden
better at
Key
your job.
Society for law school.
But that you can
That's what
only
seems
get
like.
in. You can only supposedly you can only get in by
Invite.
admission, by invite, which makes it far more exclusive. And the president of the chapter is this Judge Boasberg, who's the judge on the Mahmoud Khalil case. So he's the one who's directing him. He has to fly his military plane. No, not the Mahmoud Khalil case. Excuse me.
No.
He's the judge on the five deported people, saying you have to bring them back, and directing Trump how he would fly his military planes around. Which
those rulings are crazy. I don't understand.
they're
it,
insane.
Yeah, I
They're
don't
insane.
understand
I'll tell you
that
this
makes
much.
sense.
I'm just gonna say this.
I was trying to close out, but now we have found agreement with this crazy judge. So this judge is crazy. Yeah.
I want to say this. Trump has been people on the left keep talking about a constitutional crisis. What they mean by that is a conflict between those who are operating under Article 2 of the Constitution and those operating under Article 3. Trump has been bending over backwards, despite the fact that the judiciary has really been interfering with who he can hire to and appoint as being part of USAID, as far as being his liaison USAID, whether or not he can inspect his own books, which sounds insane. How are you supposed to be upholding the Constitution and upholding your agencies, making sure they're operating efficiently, and then have some judge come out with a decision saying, I'm not going to let you look around through there because I think it's a fishing expedition? What the hell does that even mean? You're supposed to do a fishing expedition to make sure that your own agencies are operating smoothly. It's the stupidest rationale in the world, saying, I'm not going to let you choose the person that you want. Oh, so now when he wants to appoint someone, he has to ask a judge for permission to appoint them? He's part of the executive branch. Time and again, the judicial branch has issued one tier. That's not to mention the spending and all the other stuff, and forcing him that he has to spend money and taking cases that never belong in federal court, contractual issues, which are supposed to be in the court of claims, claiming they have jurisdiction, and not only have jurisdiction, then issuing TROs, and not just issuing TROs, but issuing TROs that are so far beyond their jurisdiction. They're in the freaking Southern District of Rhode Island, and all of a sudden they're setting federal policy for what he has to do over in Iowa, and Judge Boasberg saying, you have to fly. I'm in D.C. I'm a district court from D.C. I'm directing that these plaintiffs who are from Texas and never set foot in the District of Columbia, I'm going to tell you how you're going to handle these immigrants. It's insanity what is happening here. And time and again, every single time, the mature adult in the room has been Trump, where he's been the one who's been like, all right, I'm respecting you. I'm going to follow you to the bare minimum of following, so I don't embarrass you and tell you F you, force me. which he could do, which would be that would be a constitutional crisis. He has not done that once. Quite the contrary. He's been trying to say, no, I'm listening to your order. You know, your order wasn't clear about this, or wasn't clear about that, whatever. But he's been trying to find loopholes in it. And through finding these loopholes, he's been avoiding the constitutional crisis. But these judges who keep infringing on his obvious, unique and sole authority to act as the chief of the executive branch and are pretending that they have authority to start dictating policy on a federal level, on an international level, as far as how we deal with other countries, they're out of their minds, and they're bringing us to a constitutional crisis. And it's on Chief Justice John Roberts to get up in their face and to basically say to them, hey, cut it out. Knock it off. You have to stop with all these stupid TROs. Every time some idiot comes on pounding on your door saying, stop Trump, you just jump on it, because before long we are going to have a constitutional crisis, because they're getting broader and broader with these orders to make sure that there are no loopholes. And he wants to say, let it play out, that's what's prudent, is to let it play out. No, that's the most imprudent thing in the world.
But Joe, I'm just as egregious as you. How crazy is it that the chief executive officer can't look at his own documents to exercise the law? That's what the TRO said. It says the chief executive officer, who's in charge of distributing all this money and looking and executing the law, can't look at the documents that he needs to do to actually execute the law. It's insanity. Who would make this ruling? Like this doesn't make any sense. Of course he can look at it. But again, but you know what it does? It shows you how the deep state, I don't think, is just in the executive. So Joe made.
And by the way, one last point is, people want to say it's because it's Elon, You know what? If he designates Elon as the guy he wants to do it, that is him doing it. We don't expect that the president himself is going to be riffing through files. You know, so he has the power to he's supposed to be delegating. So if he delegates to Elon, that's totally fine. He can delegate it to whoever the hell he thinks is the best person for the job. That's what we elected him to do, to delegate to the very best person to do the job. And the best person to oversee the job is Elon. Elon was delegated to Mr. Lewin or Mr. Johnson or whoever, or Madam Teresa. I don't care. That's exactly what the executive branch is supposed to be doing. And the absolute audacity of the court to think that they have a right to even be looking at this, much less be directing him as to what he should be doing, is just beyond comprehension. And it's leading us to a dangerous place in this country that the judiciary is trying to drag us toward.
Let me rapid fire these questions. But Joe, amen to that, brother. I hate when you're right, but you're right.
You almost said Mother Teresa there, Joe. I caught that. And Phil Holloway, he posted that one of the judges was requiring that Trump notify him every time he use Air Force One. And I reposted because I literally could not tell if it was satire. I was like, is this a joke or not?
These judges think they're kings. I don't know what's up with these judges. Like, you can't use the Air Force with it. Like, don't get me started. Because it's crazy town. It's literally, these judges are just going crazy. So Kimmy Joe says the green card application says that you cannot hold water for terrorists. Yes, we definitely agree with that. That's exactly what this man is doing. And I think that's the argument that Joe is definitely making, and Ron, that this guy is definitely holding water for terrorists and that he's up for deportation. Do you guys want to speak to this?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I think you guys are 100% correct. How will you feel when the next Democratic president deports every green card holder who owns a gun? This precedent is terrible. Material support versus support.
I'm going to tell you this.
Thomas.
More. I'll tell you how I'll feel about it. Fine. Go ahead. Because I do not believe that someone who's visiting this country, I hate the Wick-Yo decision, which says that they have the same rights that we have. Okay, I hate it. I think it's insane. I think the Supreme Court, I know it's the law. I think it's a backward perspective of the law, that our government was established by the people, of the people, and for the people. The people being the citizens of this country. We put our government in charge, and we said we're restricting you so that you do not abuse the people. You're not tyrannical over the people, and that's why we have our civil. That's why we have our civil liberties that's carved down in our Bill of Rights. That's why we have a Bill of Rights. So to say that Bill of Rights is supposed to be now broadened out, that anyone who sets foot on our soil gets the exact same rights as us, if you actually think it through, seems utterly backward. Thomas, so yeah, I don't think that they have the same Second Amendment rights as you or me.
Thomas, I think that they should have the same Second Amendment rights. And here's my concern from a public policy standpoint. You're taking an entire generation of Americans who want to be here, who want to be American. And you're basically ingraining into this entire generation that they are subservient to a government and that the government is not subservient to them. That is the issue that I take very strongly. And I see your point there, and I am not comfortable with it at all. Because as I said, you are basically teaching them from the minute they step foot into this country that they are subservient to the state. And that is not the case here in this country. I think it's really important to imbue American values into the people who will soon be American. If they are green card holders, generally speaking, the vast majority of green card holders go and seek to become citizens. I would like a citizenry that has a shared value of saying F you to Uncle Sam when necessary. So, I tend to be
the only benefit to becoming a citizen is the right to vote, but in every other way you have the same, and every other that you don't have it until you become a citizen. But every other way, before you attain that citizenship status, you should have the exact same rights as any other American. I look at our American privilege as being something that's special and unique. And that and that you don't, just by setting foot on our soil, even if you're trying to become an American citizen, until you cross that threshold that you are an American citizen, you don't have it. And the moment you do, that's part of the blessings of being an American.
I think that you need to have some rights. If the U.S. government has vetted you to the point that you have a green card, which is not easy, Joe, this is not an easy or simple process. It is a very long process. The vetting process is very thorough. If you have a green card here in the United States and the US government has done its due diligence, then yes, I trust that you have some quasi rights. In my opinion, I think you should have some quasi rights. And that's all conditioned upon, again, you obeying the law. So I think that it's a nice stepping stone. I support green cards because I think it's a really nice stepping stone for our next batch of citizens.
Well, just to be clear, the law does allow.
By the way, I respect your opinion on this. Like I think there's.
Yeah, no, I understand where you're coming from too. And I don't think that non-citizens should have the exact same rights as U.S. citizens. I don't think that they should be applied the same way. But I do think that there is some quasi rights that they should be entitled to.
Well, just for clarity, when it comes to gun laws, if you're a lawful permanent resident, green card holder, you can get a gun legally and all the same rights apply to you, except the only thing they can't do that a citizen, unfortunately, is certain jobs they can't hold and they can't vote, but they can get. But now all other immigrants are not allowed to have, unless you're a lawful permanent resident. So that is a right for lawful permanent residents and citizens. But all other, if you're just visiting or something, you can't have a gun. Mm-hmm. So that would be the difference. Free speech aside, he's engaging in civil disobedience. Traditionally, that ended with arrest. Doesn't that mean it's not a right? No, civil disobedience. It's the right to protest and organize versus the time, place, and manner part of it. So generally, when you get arrested for civil disobedience, you're doing it without a permit, you're doing it and blocking traffic. That's a civil disobedience. But the protest is protected. So you're talking about two different things. Civil disobedience a protest can turn into civil disobedience and vice versa. Do you guys agree? I'm not sure. If you guys...
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
Next one. Do you think they will fix the immigration process and make it more efficient? I think Trump is doing that. Yeah, I'm thinking Trump is on it.
God can only hope. No, it's not Trump that needs to do it. This is the thing I've been saying from day effing one. This is a congressional problem. This has always been a congressional problem. They continue to hand this off to USCIS and to the administrative branch. The administrative branch will go and bend with the frickin' wind. So unless you want some level of, if you're like me and you like a little consistency, just a little bit, if you're like me and you think it should be Congress, not the president, setting the limitations on how many visas come from which countries for specific reasons, then yes, I think that should very squarely be within congressional rule. They need to set very strict, clear laws. I don't like it being in the administrative branch. Now, the power to deport, the power to enforce those laws very much needs to be within the administrative branch. And the freaking courts need to back the F off on that one to a certain extent. So that's my thoughts. But I wish. My answer is I wish.
Roosevelt scouting Mount Rushmore. This is Teddy Roosevelt, not the other Roosevelt. It was on a fishing expedition. Also, Elon isn't shutting down anything. He's recommending and advising, and that means because he doesn't have the authority to do
Teddy.
it. Dani, do you guys know about what is it?
The Transturian candidates. Yes.
Now, just so you guys know, some of these super chats are coming from your
What is-
channels. That's why I'm trying to.
What is
put them up.
Transturian?
Okay, so Manchurian, right?
Yeah.
Transturian. So you've heard about the Ziz cult, right? This is a whole cult of transgender individuals. They're connected to like 6 deaths nationwide, 2 murders. And the US government is kind of like not being as honest or transparent in their disclosures of this case and how they're all connected. What's really interesting is that if you take a look at the pictures of the people who've been charged in the terrorist acts against Teslas, they all kind of have the same look. So it makes you wonder whether or not those are also connected. But yeah, it's just a funny joke on my channel. But we talk about the Ziz cult. We've talked about those cases. It's really tragic. Like, oh man, it all stems out of Vallejo and goes all the way across the US and into Canada. It's crazy.
When you say they all look the same, you mean ethnically, or you mean just as far as culturally they look the same?
I mean, as far as like gender ambiguity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ambiguity.
Ambiguity.
Yeah.
Good luck trying to figure out what they are. They're crazy is what they are.
There is no such thing as the right to vote. Voting is a privilege of the electorate. Rights are natural. Well, yeah, citizens don't have the right to vote, which is something which is an interesting quirk in New York.
And New York affirmed that yesterday. They rejected a New York statute, and they said, no, you can't give them the right to vote.
Now, so everybody doesn't freak out. U.S. citizens don't have the right to vote. For instance, if any of us move to Puerto Rico, we lose our federal right to vote because it's based on residency if you're in a state, which also brings up the weird issue where if I'm living in Florida and then I move to France, I can vote by sending my vote back to Florida. But if I lived in Puerto Rico, I couldn't vote sending it back to Florida. So yeah, so U.S. citizens don't have the right to vote. But in the Constitution, if you do give citizens the voting privilege, you can't discriminate based on sex, gender, and race. Well,
did you know I got to vote via email this last time?
That's insane.
That's crazy.
I'm not insane. I like filmed the whole process and kept sending it to my senator. I'm like, what are you guys doing about this? I sent it to the state senators. I'm like, hello, this is not secure. I don't feel good about my election knowing that this was the process that someone took to vote for me or against me.
I have such sites to show you. Says wrong, Nate. You can only get as long as you're on an immigrant visa. Well, it says law for permanent residents, and there's another part of the law for non-immigrant visa holders, which I think you're talking about, and there's 3 exceptions. Exception 1 is a valid hunting license. Number 2 is number 1, valid hunting license. Number 2 is if you're hunting for a particular purpose, so that one-time hunting. And 3 is if you're a representative of a foreign government or foreign law enforcement on official duty. Those are the 3 exceptions. So you can have one, but that makes sense. If you're Erdogans or Putin's security, you can be armed. This is make being a U.S. citizen great again. And the last one, we need an EO to make astronauts exclusively trans. That is crazy. All right, so the last little piece here. First, please visit Joe Good Logic channel, which I watch regularly, even though I'm ashamed to say I actually listen to it regularly, but I do. And
I'm a guilty pleasure.
I listen to be honest with you, I listen to you all. That's how I knew when I want to catch him on Karen Reed, I'm like, oh, listen to Uncivil and Dani. I'm like, oh, let me see what Dani's saying. So I read over to it and I listen. And then I love how Dani always has it's so much stuff going on. I'm like Dani's like so bright and everything. I'm like, man, I want to stream like this.
Shut up, Nate.
And then Joe, I love the coin thing yesterday with the thing with the coin. The guy throws up the coins, he catches all 6 coins. I'm like, what is Joe playing? So
I start my show with like some sort of funny clip, and it's usually not show related. It's just something funny, and then I'll come into it. And I found this guy who was taking coins, and I'm back in his hand. He threw up like 10 coins and just started going wah, 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 and grabbed each of them. And it was big, and he was Jewish guy, so they call it jujitsu. So
it was jujitsu. But listen, people, I'm telling you, if you're not subscribed to these guys and watching, and I'm talking about all our guests, MLS, Ron Coleman, you are missing a lot of fun. And again, I watch their shows too, so I'm not just telling you, just because they're here. They're very good. You'll see me on their shows too, especially on Joe. I love arguing with Joe, but behind the scenes, we are friends, and I love arguing with Dani too, and we are
friends today.
Yeah.
I'm part of the club. I feel so lucky.
Today's show is dedicated to Dani on Direct. She nailed it. She really did. She really did.
It's so wild because people always think that after we argue that we're no longer friends. Like I get to, I see it. I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Like we can't get into heated argument, but that's what lawyers do. We as lawyers, we argue. I remember there was one case which is a case which I'm not, you guys are looking at me
you
a
are
lot
smarter
worse.
than me, so.
Nah, it's never that.
Come on, you are. You're both a little more experienced, and so it's always an honor when I get to prove you wrong. That makes me very happy.
That's the district attorney from Utah right there, right? Yeah, come on, Dani. Like you try to kid. You're just trying to bullshit us. But anyway, yeah, Dani was almost an elected official, guys. Don't let her pretty face fool you. So with that with that all being said, Dani, what do you have coming up so people can go rush to your channel while I put your channel up on the screen?
We got Karen Reed. We got Corey Richens, the woman who poisoned her husband and then wrote a book about it for children to overcome grief. We have allegedly. We have all the things. Just come check out my channel. We do live court streaming. That's kind of our shtick right now. I also, for our members only, we do cult streams. And this is something I haven't been on top of talking about exclusively, but we talk about cults. You can see the PDF file Utah judge case. He just showed up for his arraignment yesterday, so we'll see how that goes. He helped to get a local fire chief off, gave him a really sweetheart deal, and it's just getting better. And whenever I say better, it always means worse on my channel. So just assume that. But we talk about local corruption. We talk about national cases with corruption going on. Oh, and we have Lori Vallow coming up. She's representing herself. She is the doomsday mom. She has already been convicted of murdering her 2 children, plus her new spouse's wife. And she is on trial right now for the murder of her husband, her 3rd husband, Charles Vallow, down in Arizona. As someone who's a former member of the Church Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, I think I have a very unique perspective, or the Mormon Church, on that case in particular. So if you guys are looking for a fun place to learn some more and to get some insights, come check out my channel.
Yes, definitely. Please check out Dani in Direct. I just put the link in the description for you people who are too lazy to go and search for it. Just click on the link.
Very kind.
And the next person is obviously the stalwart here, Joe Good Logic. Tell the people what's happening on the channel, brother.
On the channel, so you can see there from my recent stuff. I've taken to basically, there's so much activity going on with this current administration. I've taken to basically just keeping track of how many days in we are and what got done in the last 24 hours or so. I stream nightly from 10 till midnight, although it tends to really start 10:30 depending on the night. So yeah, but a good time. We talk about the law, and it's not about me. My chat is awesome. Everyone who comes and hangs out with them has a great time, and you probably would too. So there you go.
Well, listen, don't forget. Actually, gotta make sure.
Next week, I should say next week I will be on Tim Pool. So.
Oh yeah, and Eric.
You want to hear something funny? Eric, everyone may not realize this. The reason Eric's not here is because he's on Tim Pool. Yes. Right? He's on Tim Pool today because he's the guy. He's the man when it comes to JFK files. So they wisely got him on. A little known fact that was pretty funny is I was supposed to be on Tim Pool today, and there was travel issues. I had all sorts of travel. They couldn't work out as far as timing and coordinating everything. So they said, we're going to bump you back next week. We have another guest come on this week, and the guest they have to come on this week is Eric. And I watched this. I was so thrilled. I was like, because it actually works out better for me next week anyway. And I'm like, it's awesome. I'm so happy that he's getting that kind of exposure. So that's on Culture Wars. So he's on. I think he was on from 10 to noon today.
Will you let him know that he inspired me to run? He had a whole shtick going in 2020 where he was like, if you want to see a change in the world, be the change, and go build something, go do something about it. And I was like, Yeah, F these freaking Soros DAs who aren't doing their damn job and freaking letting my county become a shithole county. I was like, I'm done with this. And so I decided to run in part because of his little spiel he gave every morning at the time.
That's
So
very
tell him
awesome.
thank you.
Be the change you want to see in the world.
Amen to that. This one is Wendy's reminds us, don't forget tomorrow, Lego with Val and
That's so
MLS
cool.
on the channel. So don't forget about that. Joe was a beautiful hashtag Lego guest star and guest. And
Thank
with
you.
all of
I
that,
had a lot of time. It's a lot of fun on that show.
people don't
They
want
just
to
hang and chill.
They keep sending super chats. You should cancel my car for fears of deportation.
You never know.
Okay.
You never know.
But with all that, good luck to Eric tonight.
And
So
sign
go
up to this
definitely-
guy. This guy also while you're here. He's awesome, Nate the lawyer.
Nate is great.
I'm trying, and I know I give the chat a little bit, but I will say this: it's a absolute pleasure every week being able to talk to you people in the chat and argue with you guys, call me dumb and me to call you guys dumb. It's an absolute honor, and it's an absolute honor being able to argue with these fabulous attorneys. It truly is. I come here to test what I know, and I love being proven wrong. Like, remember that? I don't know if you remember the time Joe like straight up proved me wrong right on the stream, and I'm like, you know what? I got to give it up. He's right. Those moments, like people say, "Oh, aren't you embarrassed?" I'm like, no, those moments show
No.
that
We
shows
wanna
us
be proven
all
wrong.
listening to each other. I listen to them, and like even now with this whole debate about I'm going to go look up this, and I'm going to say, well, you know what? They have points because it's not about being right. It's about doing right. It's about understanding. Because we don't want to just believe.
It's about figuring out truth.
Yeah, and that's where we're all here. So with all of you here in the chat, thank you. I am gone, and we are gone, and we are ending this stream in 3, 2, 1.